Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters of the Week video. For this random page entry there on the cryptids.wikia.com website, it landed upon a creature that is, for all intents and purposes, a real-life Batman, or, in some cases, a man-bat. And it seems to be more recent sightings associated with it. This despite the fact that this is a creature that has been around for a long time, thousands of years in fact, considering the culture that it was mainly associated with. More on that here though in a minute. But lots of fascinating info to share with this creature. This is also one that's considered a dangerous one. You do not want to come across it. It's called various names, but at least its more technical name is the Camazotz. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with this mysterious cryptid. So what is this Camazotz? Well, it is a creature that is, for all intents and purposes, a vampire bat or a giant man bat. Hence I was stating earlier about the link associated with that type of mythology. But it's found there in southern Mexico and then also in Central America. And it's been around for a very, very long time. In fact, you would have to go to the Mayan culture, which dates actually around 2000, maybe even up to 3000 BC. So this is a creature that's been around for thousands of years. In fact, several depictions of this creature showcase it from the Mayan cultures, which also adds another interesting angle. Were they worshiping it as some kind of god, or was this truly some type of encounter that they had with this creature and they decided to do a visual interpretation of it? Who knows? But as far as the characteristics tied to it, like the visual characteristics, think of this. It's a humanoid-like creature, larger than your average man, but essentially it has a head, it has a body, legs, arms, but most distinctly, of course, is it has these giant wings, and it has this blackish fur or some kind of clothing that also seems to be tied to it. And most distinctly, it has this giant red set of eyes, and then also a big mouth with some long teeth associated with it. So again, think of your classic villain man-bat from the Batman tales, and then that's essentially what you have here. As far as it be considered more on the lines of a vampire bat, I didn't really read any information like as far as it, let's say, living off of the blood of people, but it may be this. Apparently it's tied to lots of mutilated livestock found throughout multiple parts of Mexico, and maybe that livestock in turn had some of its blood gone as well. So maybe that's essentially where it's tied to this type of vampire bat. But yes, this creature again has been around for a long time. You can usually find it in the nighttime specifically, but it also seems to be more on the lines of an omen of sorts, meaning if people see it, then there's usually a telltale sign of death or some kind of tragedy, something that'll occur soon, maybe even something along the lines of sacrifice. And that also seems to be tied to the Mayan depiction of it as well. Maybe I believe that's how they worshipped it too. But as far as the more recent sightings, the more modern sightings, there's this. There in 2004, January 16th to be specific, in Monterrey, Mexico, it was a chilly early morning when this occurred. Apparently this was shortly after midnight there on that Friday. So there was a young police officer by the name of Leonardo Samaniego Gallegos, and he was there patrolling an area called Valles de la Sila, by an area near Guadalupe, by a suburb called near Monterrey. And so he was there just patrolling it. I imagine when I was reading this information that he was just by himself, probably on the lonely streets. And then lo and behold, as he was crossing down a street called Aldama Street, that's when he saw something that he described as being big and black fall from a nearby tree. The interesting thing though was this. Whatever this thing was didn't hit the ground. In fact, it seemed to just hover right above it, maybe about a foot or two above the ground. Obviously, that stood out. That's not usual when it comes to that type of stuff. And so this guy This patrol officer turned on the high beams and within his car to try to see if he could get a better sight. And then that's when he saw everything that I mentioned earlier. Remember about the big black fur, or maybe the black clothing, the humanoid-like figure, the giant wings, the eyes, and so forth. That's what he saw as far as car light shining upon it. This cryptid, in turn, actually seemed to cover its eyes, and then that denotes another thing. It seems like it has this aversion to strong light. No doubt, again, because it being a nocturnal creature, its lights are probably pretty sensitive to its eyes are probably pretty sensitive to something along the lines of bright lights. And so when it covered its eyes, it became very, very angry at the fact that this stuff was being shown upon him. And then that's when it lunged at the car. And then the way that this patrol officer stated is it got a hold of its car and started to shake it violently. So in his case, this young patrol officer started to move his car in I guess you could call it a circular fashion. Like his car must have still been on, but he was flooring it while essentially turning his car in a big circle, just trying to get whatever this creature was off of his car and slide off of. But no, it wasn't happening. So he decided to grab the police radio and tried to call for reinforcements. And that's when the creature took it up a step. And that's when he decided to try to smash whatever this windshield was in terms of the car. So this creature was in turn trying to reach him. He in turn moved it into reverse. And then when he gunned the engine, he crashed it into some nearby, maybe it was a wall, maybe it was a light pole, whatever it was, but this was in turn enough force to cause him to pass out. And then he didn't know what happened afterward during that time period, because he was in turn revived by some of the nearby paramedics. All the police force were surrounding him at that point, but this creature, which he now identified as the Camazotz, was gone. It was just completely gone. That denotes another interesting thing. So here was this creature attacking him, no doubt in some kind of deadly fashion, trying to reach him not just from the hood of the car but also from the windshield. And then when it had a perfect opportunity to do so, with this young patrol officer Samaniego now passed out, it just decided to leave. Maybe it saw some of the nearby patrol sirens, like the lights blaring in the nearby area, or maybe it heard in terms of those sirens also causing it to just flee. But either way, though, it was just completely gone. But if you wanted to have proof as to what occurred, apparently that patrol car had some of the damage associated with the attack that this creature had. So apparently parts of it were mangled afterward. And even though that he gave this testimony, and a lot of people would have normally laughed it off, they didn't, because they realized that he was considered a very trusted officer. And so they took it as a real life sighting. Everyone there, in other words, thought to themselves that he was telling the truth when it came to his encounter. It seemed like though he never really encountered this creature ever again. So that was in 2004. If you wanted to see another encounter, it was this in 2009, apparently on March 6th. In this case, it took place in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico, and then there was a city called Chihuahua City, and then thereby a town called La Junta. There was a young man who was coming back from his studies. I guess he was just driving home from some kind of late night school, and he was taking a road that was considered barren. Like, in other words, hardly ever traveled. It again would have just been him, just by himself out there. And as he was doing so, just driving along nonchalantly, that's when in the middle of the road, he stated that he saw this hunched over figure just right there, just right smack in the middle of the road. I imagine it was only lit up by the moonlight in this case, as this being a non-traveled road, very hard, very doubtful that there was going to be any kind of street lamps out there. So the little light he had in terms of the moonlight, it was illuminating this hunched over figure. But no sooner did he come across it than it stood up, and then it pretty much just went towards him. Like, at that point, it wasn't even shining the lights on him that caused this creature to be irritable. No, it just went straight towards him, and then that's of course when this young man floored it. The way he described it was this creature was very, very similar to everything that as far as the encounter that was associated with that other policeman in terms of the physical characteristics. The same thing, the man bat-like creature there with the fur, there with the giant wings, with the reddish eyes. And in this case though, this creature decided to follow the young man as he was driving as quick as he could away from it. And the way it was stated by his description was it was traveling parallel to his passenger window. In other words, it was flying in the air, and as it was doing so, it was matching the same exact speed, looking in through that same passenger window of the man's Jeep. And of course, that would have freaked him out, not just because it was happening for 1 minute, but it was happening for about 15 minutes. It also denotes another thing. At any point whatsoever, it seemed like this creature again could have just had his way when it came to this young man. It could have easily just tore through the window, done something to the Jeep, anything to cause the Jeep to suddenly stop, and then the man would essentially be either murdered or killed or something else by this creature. But no, it just decided to hover next to the man's Jeep, and then it decided to fly away at that point. And then that's when he decided to tell everyone. He told one of the local newspapers called El Heraldo de Chihuahua that stated what occurred, and then they took it and they printed it in other places. And when this happened, two other people, in this case two women, Angela Mendez and then a lady named Viviana Ledesma, also stated that they in turn came across a very similar creature, in this case being nearby a town cemetery as well, and then also linking it to some of the mutilated livestock that I was mentioning earlier. So it just goes to show many modern day sightings tied to whatever this vampire bat, this giant bat. I forgot to mention it's also been called the god of the bats as well. Whatever this Camazotz is, it's been around for a very long time, and as it's done so, it's definitely stayed there within that region, and it's caused some sort of havoc among its population ever since the Mayan culture, pretty much up until today. But it always seems to be where it's done in a remote area, and it gets close to like killing people, but it decides essentially not to afterward. It just seems to prefer more along the lines of livestock. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed about this mysterious creature, what do you guys think? Is this truly a man bat that's out there? Some kind of creature that's cursed, maybe? Maybe it's actually a human being that becomes something else at night? Or maybe it's truly just a cryptid that in turn has lived there in the remote areas and is occasionally frequented by people. Let me know what everyone thinks. If anyone has been there by those specific locations and knows more about those local tales, I would definitely love to hear about it as well. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.